and we had an overwhelming demand for a full song of a synanthropic organism. So we responded.
You are listening to Urban Wildlife Podcast.
So welcome back to the Urban Wildlife Podcast. I'm sitting here, co-host Billy Brown, with not one musician like I usually am with Tony, but now we got two.
Hello.
Who are you?
I'm Bull Gervasi.
I'm sorry, I was really uncomfortable with you referring to me as a musician. Bull might be as well.
I'm wildly uncomfortable.
He just kind of like held his hands roughly in the
right.
right
Whoa.
places of his bass. No, I'm joking. Bull has a distinguished music career before Rambo.
What did you do before Rambo?
I played in a few other bands as well that did quite a bit of recording and touring.
Bull was like a legend before he joined the band, and everybody couldn't believe it when he joined Rambo. Like seriously, they're like, how the hell did you get Bull to join Rambo?
But Tony and I did our most extensive touring together.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll say I'm here with two rock stars. A little closer.
Former rock stars.
Yeah.
Former rock stars who moved on to other lifestyles.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. We were in a band that it's the kind of stuff that you got to get out of your system. Like, I don't mean like if it was a phase. It's like our kind of a punk band is like you have these feelings that you need to work through, and the band was kind of like therapy. And while we had enough musical talents to put together a pretty damn good band, we weren't going to make a career out of it. And the other interests in our lives that made us the weirdos in the first place, that made us angry at society and had to work through these demons via musical therapy, we had to turn our attention to those passions.
It was also really fun.
Yes.
It made me aware of Tony because I first became aware of Tony through your bandmate Andy,
Yes.
who then was dating a woman who was friends with my then girlfriend and now ex-wife. Complicated chain here. In any case, Andy, this was like 12 years ago or 11 years ago, showed me a video of Tony birding in Hong Kong, and then I knew who Tony was when he popped up as a Vista member under a Vista project in my portfolio. So I'll start with some introductory matter that we always include. First off, if you like this podcast, and if you're listening to it, we bet this isn't your first time, and if you're a repeat listener, you probably like us. So tell all your friends about it. You can use like non-technology and just tell them verbally. You could email your friends about it. You could post it on Facebook. You could tweet all about it. You could snap about it. Anything you want. Just get the word out about how much you love this podcast if you're digging it. So please share us as much as possible. Like us on Stitcher and iTunes. Like, we are all resolving right now to like our favorite podcasts. If you want to contribute to the podcast, either in like the little
Wildlife plan
at the ends of the episodes, or with something longer, more substantive, we're happy to take a pitch. Like, if you want to like suggest a longer idea, or if you want to go out, if you're doing like your own research, your own urban wildlife education or conservation project, and you want to go out and like record of what you're doing and talk about it a little bit, we're fine. We love that kind of thing. So
also, if you live in Australia, from Sydney to the Cape York Peninsula, and you want to show me in person your cool urban wildlife, please get in touch, because I will be there in December.
Tony's doing a tour of Queensland, basically.
I'm going to go into Sydney and visit with my friend Sydney, and then we're flying up to Cairns, and we're going to drive up from Cairns to the Cape York Peninsula.
So if you want to record something for the
Wildlife Bling,
or you can try for something longer. You can record it on your phone or on your whatever kind of recorder you got, and then either email it to us, or if it's too big for that, just drop us an email and we can arrange how to get the file transferred.
We're going to start the episode with an original piece of music. This has been requested. This is by demand. The public has demanded.
And we listen to the public.
See, this is what I'm saying. We don't get as much feedback as we would like, But when we do, we respond. And we had an overwhelming demand for a full song of a synanthropic organism. So we responded. So I recruited 3 of the greatest musicians that I know. Matt Haley on keyboards, Patrick Forrest on drums, and Liam Wilson on bass to give you the full version of Synanthropic Organism.
Dig.
Coyotes in the garbage, flies in my drain, mites in my lashes that give me no pain, flora in my belly, bugs in my guts, squirrels in my eaves, hiding their nuts. Synanthropic organism. Synanthropic organism. Synanthropic organism. Synanthropic organism. Rats in the subway, pigeons on the ledge, geckos in a crevice, hogs up the hedge, swifts in the chimney on top of my house, my cat's only inside, hunt that mouse. Synanthropic organism. Synanthropic organism. Synanthropic organism. Synanthropic organism.
We are here with our retired rock stars, Tony and Bull.
So Bull was the bass player of the band I was in called Rambo. And Bull's also my BFF, along with Andy Wheeler, who's a guitar player. So, which is like, whenever I feel like, I'm like, what the hell am I up to? What the hell am I doing? Am I really screwing up? And I think about the fact that Bull and Andy are still my best friends, and they saw me at my absolute worst behavior. We had multiple drummers, and I love those guys too. We had
That's such a stereotype, though.
Guitar. Well, Bull is our second bass player.
Did they spontaneously combust? No.
Yeah, it's like Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
The final lineup Rambo was the definitive one.
Okay.
But because Rambo started out as a joke band,
what do I know?
and when we, made a record and people liked it and wanted us to tour, 2 of the members of the band were like, "Well, we didn't sign on for this because we thought this was a joke band," so they weren't able to tour, and we got Bull to join, and he stayed with us and then we're like, okay, we're not going to be a band without Bull, and then we had 2 of the drummers. Of the last drummer, Dave, we were also like, well, we won't be a band without Dave.
Okay.
So
he's stuck.
And I still love those guys. I mean, I love every member of the band. I'm still very good friends with.
But you, Andy, and Bull are the remaining nucleus of the.
Right.
Whatever.
I mean, Dave too.
And Dave.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, but Bull and Andy and I hang out all the time. In fact, Andy moved to Los Angeles, and I'm not even joking. When for the first 2 years, when Andy would come and visit, if Bull and Andy and I were together, and when we would say goodbye to Andy, I would cry. Specifically to the fact that 3 of us were together, just put me over the edge, saying goodbye to him, It's it was crazy,
So, when you were, you were birding, of course, when you were touring, and so you're going to hear more about this in the interviews. First, our discussion, we have 2 discussions on this episode.
I found out that I am a much better interviewee than an interviewer. So, we brought in Liam Wilson, who is the bass player of the Dillinger Escape Plan. And he's a very old friend of mine as well. And
you'll know his work from basically every bit of music you hear on this podcast.
Yeah, whenever you hear, he's the bass player on the theme song, and then when you hear really weird, when I say something weird,
Unholy Trio.
But we actually go over that when he's on the podcast.
Okay, good point.
So so that's Liam, and so he interviews me about my travels, in Rambo, which I probably should have had Bull there in the first place, but Bull's very, very busy, so sometimes he might not even, when we did it, he might have not even been here, for that matter. Well, Bull's here now.
Yes. And then, so the other interview we're going to do is with
Jonathan Meberg from the band Shearwater, which, if you're into birds, you know is a type of bird, a type of seabird, basically mini albatrosses or like quarter-sized albatrosses. And he is a guitar player and singer, basically the main songwriter of this band Shearwater. And he studied striated caracaras in Falkland Islands. So I just thought it'd be kind of cool to like interview people who are into music and also wildlife. This guy, because that's what I was. As Liam is a bit, as what Bull is, and
I think it's a good message that if you're out there, in case you are out there listening to this podcast, listeners, if you are a musician who, when you tour, whether that's around your home country or in other countries, if you take time when you're out there and you're birding, maybe you're like a herper and you're flipping some rocks or some boards while you're out there too. Maybe you're really into butterflies and like you're checking out what you don't get to see at home. Whatever your thing, if you are a naturalist musician and you're out there touring and checking stuff out, we would just love it so much if you could record a little bit from some faraway city for you. And so with that, here we go with the interviews.
Is the Shearwater singer guy still around? Could you put me on the phone with him? I invited you to go bird watching the next day, but you weren't available. You were like driving through to New York or something that night.
Oh yeah, on tour it's really funny. You can hardly ever do anything besides just play shows because you're always on to the next town.
I guess I was in a band too. I was in a Rambo, anarchist punk band. So I guess we had a different kind of touring schedule, where we actually get to do a lot of stuff. But I guess like we didn't have to worry about sound checks and counting out merch and all that stuff. We would just like we were like, let's have the show, and we're like, all right, we'll see you then. Even in Europe, they would get really mad at us because they always wanted to have these huge, long sound checks. And we're like, no, we'll we want to actually see what we're playing. So,
that's in a lot of ways, I think it's probably the smartest thing you could do. But also, how much time you actually need for a sound check and stuff. After a while, especially if you're using a fairly standard setup, it's like you don't really need to check your drums for an hour.
Yeah, it is the case. And I talked to you. You told me you studied striated caracaras in the Falklands.
That's right.
Billy usually handled the Google when I was working for R5 Production, but I wasn't actually working the show they played, and I tried to get him to go bird watching, and then he was unavailable. So I guess
being on tour means you're pretty much unavailable. That's the problem with it. It's people say, "Oh, can you hang around for the next day?" And it's like, "Nope, I will be 8 hours away from here tomorrow."
Yeah. So do you know? I'm sure you're familiar with the Swirlies, right?
Only by name.
Right. So they're like kind of shoegazy out of Boston, Tang Records. My really good buddy is their bass player. And he's got his PhD, so he Black Cotton Night Herons. He would tell me that he would, I guess that, they would still have kind of like sound checks and the whole, like, a little bit step up of the production that, anarchist punk band like mine would have, maybe probably more similar to what you guys deal with, but he would just drive the band overnight and then get out and go birding. And like, everybody was in the van and get back in and drink and get back to the next show.
Well, as long as you don't need sleep, that can really work.
Yeah. So, all right. I definitely want to get into what you see while you're on tour, but I'd love to if you could just talk about how you got into nature and, you named your band after a bird, and so many of your songs, like Rook, and, there's a narrative of birds weave through your music. If you could just give us a little background on, your interest in nature, and then kind of how you started the band and, was able to name it Shearwater. I think, from what I gather, it's pretty much, you're like the main songwriter, right?
Yeah, I'm the only remaining member from when we started it. It's because I can't quit. When I quit, the band's over.
Kind of so it's like The Cure, in a sense, where like, it's really a solo act with a name rather than your name.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe it as a solo act though, because I can't do this all by myself. Like I have to be working with other people. It's just who that group of people is changes over time. But on the most recent record, for instance, Howard Draper played on the record. He was in the band back in the Rook and Palo Santo days, and then I've got several other people I've been working with for a number of years on there as well. So it doesn't change over every time. It's just sort of you end up with a bullpen of people that you work with over the years. I can't think of any other way to keep a band going for, almost 15 years.
Yeah, it's cool when you still have good times with everybody. In our band, we parted ways with the bass player amicably, and it was great because when our bass player got typhoid from our Asian tour, and we had to play a festival.
Oh my God!
We were able to get him back.
Well, when you first start a band and you're like in your late teens or early 20s, and it's like kids building a treehouse, and it's all for one and one for all, and you're going to be in this till you die. But a few years later, life starts to look kind of different, and especially if the band's not making piles of money or anything like that. Different things tend to pull people in different directions. I'm just kind of amazed and grateful that I get to still do this. I never would have thought it would have lasted this long.
Yeah, so, man, okay, there's so many questions this is leading to, but I guess for our listeners, they should know a little bit more about your background, because especially they're starting from, scratch from you as as an ornithologist and as a, maybe perhaps as a musician too. So, I don't want to go to the next.
I should say that describing me as an ornithologist, I don't think is exactly right. I decided not to pursue my PhD in biology. If I were Dr. Myberg, I think I'd feel better about calling myself an ornithologist. On the other hand, I've spent more time thinking about and studying this one group of birds, the caracaras, than just about anybody else. So in the world of caracaras, I can hang just sort of by default. But I made a conscious choice to not become a professional academic some years ago. And I was trying to be a musician and a graduate student at the same time, and it took me 6 years to get through a 2-year degree. And then I had to really make the choice about whether to go all in with
most people don't go to
academia or not.
For a master's.
The reason, I should explain why I was in the Falklands, or how I ended up being attracted to that place, because that is kind of it's not the first place you think of.
The Malvinas.
Yeah, if you're from Argentina, it's the Malvinas. If you're from most of the rest of the world, it's the Falklands. But the reason I ended up there is that after I graduated from college, I went to a little school in Tennessee called the University of the South, which is a tiny sort of liberal arts college up on a mountain. And one of the features of that school is that they participate in a program called the Thomas J. Watson Fellowship, which is a really crazy grant that's awarded to about 50 students a year to pursue projects that they design themselves in one or more non-U.S. countries. And the projects can be anything.
This is Billy. I want to interrupt really fast to say I applied for but did not get one of those, so I know exactly what you're talking about, and they're really awesome. One of my friends got one and had a hell of a year after college.
Oh, cool. When was that?
So it would have been, so we graduated in 99, so my friend Carl would have done it in the year 2000 and studied the Armenian diaspora.
Exactly that kind of project. Yeah, the projects tend to be something that's going to really push you out into a number of different places in the world, but they have to be places that you haven't gone before. So you're sort of by definition wandering into a place in which you have no expertise and you have nothing but interest, which is hard to sustain for a year when you're 22 years old and have no idea what you're doing. But in my case, the project that I proposed was a study of community life at the ends of the earth. I'd grown up entirely in the southeastern U.S. and never really been outside of it. And I was just very curious about remote parts of the world. So I looked at a map and did a little research and found some of the places that seemed as far-flung as I could find, and I went to them. And one of the places that I ended up going was the Falklands. But when I went there, I wasn't especially interested in birds. I mean, I liked birds, I liked wildlife, I liked being outdoors, but it didn't go much further than that. But in the Falklands, it's hard not to notice the birds because they're so odd and interesting. There's not many different species, but the ones that there are fascinating. You know, they have a flightless duck, for instance, and they have penguins and albatrosses and these strange birds of prey called striated caracaras that live in the Falklands and on some really remote islands off Tierra del Fuego, and that's it. And just by chance, I ended up staying in a boarding house with a scientist from England named Robin Woods, who was about to do a survey of these striated caracaras in the outermost islands of the Falklands. And I wanted to see that place, so I just tried to persuade him that he needed an assistant, and eventually I wore him down and he decided to take me on. So for 7 weeks, I worked as Robin's assistant on this survey of the outer islands of the Falklands, looking for nests and breeding pairs of striated caracaras. And that experience really blew my mind. There are parts of the Falklands that, I should explain that the Falklands are an archipelago of 780 islands. Most of them are very tiny, but that's actually saved them because, people ran sheep on the biggest ones and also did a little other small-scale farming, but sheep were the big agricultural, wool was the big agricultural product. But some of the islands were so small that it really wasn't worth it to them to do anything with them. So they have remained in more or less a state of nature. There's no mammalian predators. There's no introduced pests. You can walk onto some of these islands and it's like going back 15,000 years. And almost their entire vertebrate fauna is birds. Everything from the penguins and the burrowing petrels to a weird little wren that's it's not flightless, but it spends most of its time running around on the ground on the boulder beaches. And then there's some strange birds that you think of as more almost like Andean birds from South America, like synclodes and the long-tailed meadowlark and the thrush. And the avian fauna is South American in general, but some of the species have sort of diverged within the Falklands and become endemic. But the caracaras are just a fascinating animal, full stop. They're a bird of prey, but they're sort of like if you imagine building a crow on a falcon chassis. Like they are intelligent, they're curious, they're social, and when you go to their islands, they come right up to you. They sort of have this incredible curiosity about anything that they haven't seen before. And they'll look you right in the eye and try to go through your bag. And they're just so unusual that I felt this strong sort of attraction to them immediately that has stayed with me ever since. And actually right now I'm
Are they in
writing
the settlements of Falklands, or do you have to only see them in the rural areas?
Well, there's one big town, Stanley, and that's, about 2,500 people. And then there are a few little farm settlements dotted around the islands with only, several hundred people, tops, all told. And there are a few settlements where the caracaras do come in and they're sort of tolerated. Like on Carcass Island, for instance, Lorraine Miguel, who lives there, feeds them her kitchen scraps, and there's always a group of them hanging around the house. In other places, they've been not so fortunate in their encounters with people. For a while, there was even a bounty on them because of the perception that they were a threat to sheep. And so people shot the living daylights out of them for a long time, up until the 80s, I would say. But I think attitudes are starting to change about them. And luckily for them, they still, lived and bred in these islands where there weren't people a lot of the time, so they were safe, kind of protected by default.
I've only seen, I think, 3 species of caracara. And
which ones have you seen?
Well, they split. It's kind of cheating. They split northern and southern, crested caracara. So
you're gonna spring that one on me, okay?
I'm gonna what?
Just kidding. No, the northern and southern crested caracara are, for listeners who don't know, they look nearly identical. The southern ones are bigger and their plumage is a little bit different, but they're divided more or less at the Amazon. So there's one that runs north of the Amazon and one that goes south all the way down, not even just to Tierra del Fuego, not even just to Cape Horn, but they've actually been seen on Diego Ramirez, the southernmost point of land on the South American continent.
Wow.
And the northern species seems to be on the move right now, which I'm really interested in. There's this relict population of them in Florida, which seems to be left over from the Pleistocene. But then there's the Central American population has just been steadily moving north. They've always been in southern Texas, but now they're fairly common in northern Texas. And they're starting to be seen all over the place. There have been sightings of them in Washington State, in Vancouver, in Montana, and last year in New York, we actually had the very first crested caracara sighting at Bear Mountain State Park.
Yeah, I've chased them in Jersey, not seen them, but I've seen them in Florida and Texas and Belize but yeah, they're awesome, and they're very comfortable in right in the, not necessarily right in cities, but they're really comfortable in like agricultural areas, like right near towns and everything. You'll see them flying.
Yeah,
over.
they've been associated with farming settlements in South America for quite a long time. The book that I'm writing right now, there's a major character in it is a writer named William Henry Hudson, and he grew up in Argentina on a farm in the 1870s, and they were a common feature of life there, just like they are actually in the Falklands around farms. It's interesting actually with the cresteds, that's where you see them. When you go out to the albatross colonies and things, there might be one or two cresteds around, but there'll be 50 striatids. The striatids really own that habitat. But the cresteds have done very well around people, and they've done so for quite a long time.
Bet you people have them right in cities, some places. I just can't think offhand if I can remember seeing them, right in a city or whatever, because they seem to be so comfortable around people.
They like garbage dumps and sewage ponds and things like that. You'll see them there. There was in Austin. There were some just a couple miles from downtown. There was a pair along the Colorado River there, and there was some down at the sewage ponds too, at the sewage treatment plant.
Yeah, I've actually birded there before. It's a great spot.
Oh, Hornsby Bend? Yeah, that place is awesome. It's really. I lived in Austin for 12 years, and that was one of my favorite spots to go because there's always good birds there. And no, it doesn't smell bad. I mean, it's a little bit earthy every once in a while, but I've just seen all kinds of stuff out there. Waterfowl and birds of prey.
But it's on albino barn swallow there. And,
wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that was great. As caracaras go, I also some yellow-headed. They're just super common. And they're also in
like Belize.
Yeah, and also Peru and Brazil. They're one of the most common. If you're from my experience in the neotropics, it's one of the most common raptors that you see.
Around people.
They're just kind of ubiquitous. I'm not seeing the other cooler ones. I feel like
I've
seen the three most common caracaras.
Can you tell me any stories about the yellow-headeds at all? Have you ever seen them doing anything interesting?
I just feel like I see them yelling their heads off at everything. Flying around. They're just really vocal. You hear them before you see them often. And
have you seen them in towns and in cities and that kind of thing? I've seen videos of them in Panama City.
I'm trying to. I think I've seen them in little settlements and flying around on the edges, but they could just be flying from field to field and just happen to be over houses. I haven't seen them in Curitiba or Belize City or anything.
You're in the city proper.
Right, but I have I've seen other raptors common blackhawk. I've seen them flying right over Belize City, so I definitely keep an eye out, obviously, for them. But yeah, can't give you
This is the thing with caracaras. The caracaras have some strange force field around them that somehow repels attention. I can't quite figure it out, but of course I would think that because I'm writing a book about them right now. But it's incredible to me how little attention has been paid to that group of species because they are so interesting. And I think some of it is that they've adapted so well to us. What?
Yeah, where does laughing falcon fit in with them? Because they're kind of like, they have like a similar wing pattern. They kind of, I mean, you know, the caracaras are kind of like scavenging falcons, and laughing falcon really looks a lot like a caracara.
Yeah, they're often their own line. I mean, they're all falcons. But I think, I mean, they divided. There's the tribe. There's the Falconini and Paliborini, and I think they're in Paliborini, the laughing falcon. But they're not a caracara, strictly speaking. They're closer to, I think, the forest falcons.
It's interesting because if you look at their it seems like all caracaras kind of have a similar light areas with the wing and tail, and they have that as well. And I don't know if that's maybe think that. Well,
some of that is, you know, it's just probably lifestyle. I mean, they caracaras aren't built for speed. Although some of them can be pretty quick, but you know, they're not built for speed in the way that a true falcon, like a peregrine falcon or a kestrel or something is. Their wings are much more crow-like. You know, it's funny, there's a pair of striated caracaras I was just visiting in England in captivity up in the Cotswolds. And these are old birds, they're in their mid-30s. And one of the keepers at the little park where they were living was telling me that the only time they really got upset was when ravens flew over. There was a pair of ravens that nested nearby for a while, and every time they would fly overhead, the caracaras would get excited and display against them. And I wondered if they had made the mistake of thinking that they were other caracaras, because the shape of them is so similar, you know, the shadow from beneath. It's intriguing because, of course, ravens, you know, aren't birds of prey, but caracaras and ravens are very similar in their niches, and also I think, and this is underappreciated, in their you know, their brains, their intellectual ability.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd just to check in on another side of what we wanted to talk to you about.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something earlier about the demands of when you're on tour, but what are giving notable birding memories from touring?
From touring.
One of the things that got us into this theme of, hey, let's talk to musicians about birding, is just that before I even met Tony and I have known each other for like 10 years now, but before I met him, I saw him in a video someone had done of him birding in Hong Kong when they were on tour.
Of who?
And so of Tony birding in Hong Kong when he had been on tour. And
Tony?
It got us thinking. Oh yeah, no, you. The video Andy made of you guys when you were out. Yeah. And so that got us thinking.
About your kites, yeah.
That as we're thinking of like how, you know, ways to work in observations from cities around the world, that another birding musician might have some interesting tales to tell of
yeah. Although the thing is that, you know. Well, it makes sense for that to be part of an urban wildlife blog because all you see on tour pretty much is cities. Or you're in transit between them, and usually the drive between them is kind of a strange haze, as you know, where your brain isn't really that active. But I'm trying to think of anything in particular. I mean, I remember once being in Toronto, and I stepped outside the venue at Lee's Palace and just happened to see a red-tailed hawk nail a pigeon right on the street in front of the club. They made the most incredible little sideways swerve and just absolutely demolished this pigeon that was sitting up on top of the storefront nearby.
That's awesome.
But then it was badass.
Have you
Good.
Do you squeeze birding in on tours at all, or like do you get out the local patches? Is that like part of your where you're at? You know,
it just can't. I mean, it's too. I wish I could tell you, yeah, I go birding all the time on tour, but I think the last couple of tours I even just left my binoculars at home because I get so frustrated by it. I did go birding in Amsterdam last time I was there, and that was really good. I saw a blue throat, which I'd never seen before, and
nice.
And then, you know,
for our listeners aren't birders, about as absurd as a bird can get.
The blue throat?
Oh, is it blue throat? I thought you said a hoopoe for some reason.
No. No, blue throat. No, hoopo's not pretty absurd though. Yeah. I'm trying to think when the last time I saw a hoopoe was. I was probably in Africa. I don't think I was on tour. But yeah, it's a beautiful bird for sure.
The canals in there's a good bird great in the canals in Amsterdam.
There is, yeah, and you can see like more hens and little herons and things, like gray herons. The place I went this year that was really well, I went two places this year that were doing research for my book that were just astonishing for birds. One was southern Guyana, and then the other was a tributary of the Madeira down in Brazil called the Secundarie. And that was the first one was I wasn't really in the company of any other birders. Then the second one I was. So in Brazil, you know, I saw a lot more small birds that I was able to identify with help, and some of which were just absolutely spectacular. And then in Guyana, it was more of the big flashy stuff that I was able to identify, you know, like macaws and sunbitters, you know, things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That place, southern Guyana, is just it is such an interesting place. The forest is similar to the Amazon forest, you know, it's continuous with it, but it's also quite different. And it's parts of it were just so wild. I went up a river called the Rewa, and there were, you know, I saw wildlife in there that just vanishes whenever there are people around. There were giant otters everywhere, and giant river turtles. We saw there was a puma just sitting on the bank of the river looking at us.
That's awesome.
Tapirs and capybaras and stuff. I saw a jaguar in Brazil. I didn't see one in Guyana, but they were definitely around. I saw tracks, and I saw a tapir that had just been, you know, it had just been attacked by one. In Brazil, it was actually pretty freaky. We were listening for some kind of, I think an ant ran, like a white-browed ant ran, and there were four of us, sorry, and suddenly I saw this thing coming towards us in the forest. I couldn't tell what it was, just sort of this reddish-brown shape. I thought it might be a rocket deer or something. And we were on a trail that had just been cut through, you know, a couple of weeks previous. And then all of a sudden, it was like you could see the rosettes on its fur, and I was like, oh, shit, it's a jaguar. And the jaguar, I think, was surprised to see us, and so we just stood there, and it just stood there, and it kind of just disappeared after a little while, and we kept on birding.
That's awesome. When I saw a jaguar, it was just from a boat trip in Brazil, like where I was expected to see it. I never just ran into one. But my first, I saw two leopards, and I saw them on tour. We weren't playing Sri Lanka, but we were on tour in Asia, and we had
You saw a leopard in Sri Lanka?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yellow National Park is supposed to be like maybe the easiest place to see them in the world because they're it's like scrubby savanna. So you have better sight lines than like the forest that you know usually see leopards in, and there's no dholes or tigers, so they're like the top predator. I guess it could be more bold, so they're just kind of like we saw one that's like on a rock and like hanging up in a tree, and the other one was like eating a axis deer in the woods.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
You know, we did tours. We had we bought this all Asia pass, and we set our tour dates up before the tickets don't go on sale till January. Set the tour dates up, and then when the tickets only went on sale, it didn't go to the Philippines anymore. So we canceled our Philippines dates because it's what we couldn't afford to spend more money. But we could go to Sri Lanka according to the tickets, so we just went there on vacation.
Wow.
So you're from Austin, but now you live in New York City?
Yeah, I've lived here for the last 5 years.
Where do you get out and bird in New York City?
Well, you know, it's funny. Central Park's great. Like all these migrants come through Central Park, so that's you can go in there with a pair of binoculars and see all kinds of stuff without working too hard. Prospect Park's great too. And honestly, I mean, like even just sitting at I live sort of over near the Brooklyn Bridge on the Brooklyn side, and the other day I was just sitting in my apartment right where I'm sitting now, and I heard this walk, walk, walk. And I was like, for real? And I heard it again, walk, walk, walk. And I looked up, and there were 4 ravens.
Wow.
And I looked it up, you know, that there are ravens in the city now. there's a pair that seems to be nesting somewhere in Chelsea, I think, and so they're definitely nesting in Queens. Like, they're coming in. It's really cool to see them. We've also there's a pair of peregrine falcons that's right. The territory seems to be somewhere right around here, so if I go up on the roof of my building, like I saw them yesterday, just flying around it was a windy day. It seemed like they're having a good time.
That's awesome. Yeah, we have peregrines. We have peregrines in Nestle in City Hall, and we have we've been seeing ravens in Philly too, but we haven't no one's found the nest yet. So we're
that's the mystery. Like, where's the nest? Does somebody know? New York, of course, has a celebrity hawk. There's Pale Mail, and that built his nest on that building. Yeah. And I went over to see him, thinking that it was going to be a little bit of a search to find him, and I went to the pond in Central Park where it's the best view of the building. And I looked up, and there was the nest, and there was Pale Mail sitting to the left of it. It was just like he was on display. Wow. Like, oh, okay, there he is. Hi.
Are you from Austin, or you just lived there in your early? Is that where you got your start in like playing around?
Yeah, I'm not from Austin. I moved there in 1999 and lived there for 12 years. So I lived there longer than I've ever lived anywhere else. But before that, I was from the southeast.
So Hornsby Bend is like the classic spot, right? Because the sewage treatment plant right in Austin. Is there any other spots you can talk about in Austin that are like?
Oh gosh, sure. I mean, Laguna Gloria over on the west side is a little bit, easily accessible and a great spot. If you go, Austin's so interesting because it sits right in this boundary between a couple of different ecosystems. So if you head west even a little bit, you end up in this sort of hill country, juniper, scrubby stuff, a lot of limestone. And then if you go east, you end up in a pine forest in no time. So it's really possible to see all kinds of different, all kinds of different birds, all kinds of different habitats, different wildlife. It's a transitional kind of place, which makes it great for birding. And Texas in general is just such a tremendous birding state.
Well, I'm Tony Crosdale.
I'm still Liam Wilson.
I'm still Billy Brown.
And today we're flipping the script where I am one of the normal co-hosts of the podcast, but I am going to be interviewed by Billy. And since I'm being interviewed, we brought in Liam Wilson, who is our bass player for our intro song. He also does all the bass behind the weird interludes, the segues that we record, that I do a stupid voice for, like Synanthropic Organism.
What's stupid about that?
Is that really stupid? We don't have to. Maybe I shouldn't say stupid. Maybe we should edit that out.
That's joking.
Yeah, sorry. I got tackled the other day. I was at a Friends of a Hicken volunteer appreciation night, and this dude love tackled me and was like, Synanthropic Organism. So it's getting out there, which makes you quite happy. And we're supposedly working on a Synanthropic Organism song. Maybe by the end of this season we'll have it or not. It depends. Mostly it depends on what Liam's up to, because he tours in a band and has a baby and shit like that. So with Liam, we brought Liam. Plays bass in the Dillinger Escape Plan and this new death metal project named
John From.
And what's the name about?
It's like the cargo cults, South Pacific Islanders, World War II. American soldiers would land there. The story is, I don't know, there's lots of history there. But basically, the Islanders were asking these American soldiers, who are you? They'd be like, oh, I'm John from New York, or I'm John from Chicago. So they started spelling all this John, F-R-U-M, and that's what they call their god and who they expect to come and save them. It's kind of heavy. It's interesting. So I don't know, I thought it would be a funny name for a death metal band, because it sounds like a singer-songwriter, but...
Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about some touring, some birding.
Yeah, and today's podcast is powered by two different kinds of scotch. We got Lafroig and we got Chivas Regal. Is that how you say it? I'm not sure. We'd be happy to be corrected by a Scotsman, perhaps.
And if you're in Edinburgh and you happen to see a fox run across the street.
Yeah, or a Banksy, which is...
The hell's that?
What they call great skuas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I guess, okay, guys, this is it's up to you. So start talking and ask me questions.
Well, yeah. So I guess we kind of pre-gamed this conversation a little bit, and we were, I was, I guess, drawn into this to open up the conversation or open up the dialogue about being in a band and touring around your other interests, or kind of like touring places that you also want to bird in, and how you go about booking those tours, especially at a time when most bands were not playing these countries. I mean, that was kind of what always impressed me about it. And you would go and you would play these shows, but then you would also come back with these crazy birding stories, and and then just kind of the intersection of where your band members shared your interest, did not share your interest, grew to share your interest, grew to really hate, your interests. I don't know.
I feel like Tony, from my perspective, seems to have sucked a lot of people into birding.
Yeah, well, specifically, our bass player, Bull, he is now a birder and goes out, and, he will say, largely due to being on tour and going birding with me. Yeah. But one of the,
it's a lot to unpack there, but
but one of the incidences that not saying led to the breakup of the band as in conflict, but it led to the breakup of the band in terms of an incident that made me reevaluate my priorities was Bull and I went birding in Kuala Selangor, which is a wildlife reserve just north of Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and we gave ourselves 10 hours to get to the next city, JB, I think Johor Bahru, which is right across the straits from Singapore, and we gave ourselves 10 hours to get to the show. It took us 11, and we missed the show. I will say, our defense, part of us missing the show was that I think the other bandmates got mad and kind of gave up rather than just waited for us. But I don't think it was that. But whatever. Luckily the kids could all come to Singapore the next day because they could literally walk, to the show from that city. It made us.
They wouldn't wait an hour. Yeah, I digress.
Well, they didn't know we're coming.
Okay.
You know what I mean? They didn't know. There was no way to get a hold of them and let them know.
This is the day before, the age before you all had cell phones, or
yeah. Well, we're also in Asia. We're touring in Asia, so we tried to get. Why
didn't you email them?
Well, we got on the bus and literally
from your.
It's probably 200 miles from one city to the other. So we figured, what's the big deal? It's going to take us, 5 hours max if we're changing and the buses go slow. It took so long. But anyway, so that happened, and I really thought about it, and I was like, it wasn't an unreasonable thing we did where we, it was a mistake, but the point was brought up, well, maybe, your priority here is you're on tour, you should not do anything else just in case something disastrous like this happens. And and I really searched myself, I'm the idea of going on tour and not getting out to see wildlife just in case a disaster happens and I miss a show, I'm not going to do that. And it made me realize that my priority was no longer making music, and it was wildlife, and I had to focus on that.
But even before you did that, were you getting out all the time to see wildlife, or were you able to see wildlife just around you passively when you're?
There was certainly part of that. Yeah, we'd see wildlife, but I'm not going to. Yes, I do the Urban Wildlife podcast. Urban Wildlife is a huge part of my life. But I don't want to, if I'm paying, especially when you're touring Asia, they're not flying you in there. You're paying out of your pocket to go to these countries, and it's awesome and it's wonderful to play these kids, and they're our fans. They have our record. Our records are released over there, and they locally produced. They are legitimate fans of ours. We're not just going over there and being we're the spectacle from America to display. They're our fans, and we do have a responsibility to them, absolutely. And my heart was broken that we missed that show, but with that said, if I'm going over there, especially on my own dime, I want to get out and see wildlife, and in crazy, pristine, beautiful places. And as much as I love urban wildlife, like you're not going to see an elephant, or a giant hornbill in a pocket park downtown of these places. So I really did want to get out, and again, we still were able to do a lot of that, but the idea that like I can't spend a day in the reserve a few hours from the city, just for the off chance that something like this would happen, again, like I was like, I felt really bad. I even like, I got choked up. I cried a little bit, I felt really bad. I disappointed everybody, but when I searched myself and said I said, but I didn't feel like I did anything wrong either. Yeah.
But there was that incident.
Well, I'll bring up something I heard this week just to interject. I was listening to a podcast where it was talking about Woody Allen saying something like, if somebody woke you up in the middle of the night and shook you and said, "What are you?" That's kind of what you do. So I think in that moment when somebody woke you up in the middle of the night and shook you and said, "What are you? What do?" You would probably say, "I'm a herpetologist," or "I'm an ornithologist," or whatever. Not, "I'm a singer in a punk band."
Yep.
And I think that's kind of just the end of it. It's as simple as like you use that as a vehicle to do what you're actually doing now. Not that you wouldn't sing for a punk band now, but your priority is wildlife. And kind of always has been, so all these other things have been a vehicle for that. Not that they aren't sincere, but that's the impression I get. And about other things, I mean, I'm putting a spin on it, but...
Yeah, well, my root of beginning the punk was like being like a kid growing up in Philly, getting lots of fights, feeling alienated, and I was into wildlife since I was like 9 years old. And then when I get old enough, I stopped reading Ranger Rick and start reading like Audubon magazine and Nature Conservancy. I started realizing that what I love was under siege, and so I was like alienated and like politically conscious. And then I got introduced to like political punk bands when I was 14, 15, and like stuck with it. And then I formed my own. And then from going on tour, first with as a roadie for Kill the Man of Questions, and then with my own band Rambo, I started seeing wildlife in cities, like in the canals of Amsterdam, So
let's talk about that. Like, what do you see in the canals in Amsterdam?
So, like, I remember, like, I didn't even have. I did ask to borrow my parents' like bird guide to Europe, and I didn't even have binoculars because I left my binoculars at a punk fest in Toronto. No, not even Toronto. I was like outside of Toronto, like an hour outside of Toronto. I got hit by a tornado. Everybody ran, and I lost my binoculars. So I don't have them.
Were they nice binoculars?
They were like $50 Tascos.
Okay. Something I've discovered is how birders, it's almost like sniffing butts. Like, they compare binoculars.
Yeah, there's some of that, but like, there's definitely like, you don't want to be snooty and be like, if you have sub $1,000 binoculars, you're not serious, because I mean, come on.
Well, people sort of walk up to you, like, and they don't know what to talk about. They're like, so hey, you got the Monarch 4500s.
Good, I think you kind of...
Saturn was discovered with less. Let's be real.
You get the Swarovski...
But I will say, when I was on tour, in this very tour we're talking about, when we were in Sri Lanka, we did not play Sri Lanka. We just went there because our Philippine dates, we had to cancel because there was an issue with the airline tickets for the All Asia Pass, so we couldn't go to the Philippines anymore. Which is crazy because it would have been only like $4, but for some reason when you're like 26 and like scraping by, $400 seems like the world.
$400?
Yeah, $400.
Yeah, that's a lot when you're 26.
Yeah, but on top of you just spent, the band spent $2,000 each for plane tickets, so it seemed like a huge deal.
Yeah.
So anyway, but we could still fly to Sri Lanka, and I met this guy Rohan there, who was our guide. Took us to Yal National Park, and he was phenomenal. And he was before he was a tour guide, he was like a local guide at this hotel right outside of Yal National Park that got smashed by the tsunami. And he's showing us like the grounds of the hotel just annihilated. The whole time we were there. It was I was very proud to be American because very few people go to Sri Lanka. Very few Americans. So the only Americans most of these people have ever met were the Marines that came and like cleared their roads, built them field hospitals, and like field mess halls and all this stuff to like, take care of people in this disaster. And maybe very, very proud to America. American is seeing like went to the sea turtle rescue.
Coming from an anarchist.
Yeah, went to the we went to the sea turtle place where they find sea turtle eggs and they hatch them safely and release them, and all the like benches and tables were covered in U.S. aid bags. So he's telling me the story. Obviously all these people died. Horrible tragedy. And in this, he mentions that he lost his Swarovskis, his $1,500 binoculars.
Which for a guy in Sri Lanka is a lot of money.
Right, but I mean, in this horrible tragedy, this guy was such a birder that he still made a point to be like, and I lost my Swarovskis. I did send a couple of emails around to people who I knew were birding, and I should have probably followed up with more. I wouldn't be surprised if Swarovski would have gave him a pair, but I never didn't follow up.
That story,
yeah. But I don't know how I got on that tangent, but so anyway, we had this thing happen on tour, and the guy who was the most angry about it was Andy, who I know Billy through, and Andy's still. And Bull and Andy are still my two best friends. So these guys saw me at my worst, and they're still. Well, Bull was kind of complicit in this thing that we did, and so Bull became a birder with and Andy got mad at me being birdie, but generally it wasn't a problem because I was taking them to be like. Everybody in the band was outdoorsy to some level, For sure. So they were into it, Hey, and that's why I chose to be like, hey, let's go to Yala National Park because, we did actually go to the Rainforest Reserve, too, where if you go to Rainforest, you rarely see anything else but birds because it's hard to see anything. But, in Yala National Park, we saw elephants and water buffalo and 2 leopards and a sloth bear and, all this stuff that, if you're not a birder, you can't help but think it's awesome.
I think it's awesome.
And Sri Lankan rat snake. And he just told me it was a Sri Lankan rat snake.
Okay.
It was up in a tree looking
no
like
one knew about what species. Okay.
And there was we did see mugger crocodiles, and we saw was it savannah monitor? There was a monitor. Maybe not savannah in Sri Lanka. There was
I forget what kind.
Some sort of land monitor.
Yeah.
And also the water monitor like Liam was mentioning earlier, saw in Thailand, they're everywhere in Asia.
Let me ask this question. So when we're talking about Southeast Asia, as somebody who's both traveled there and played there, it is certainly more of a tourist destination than it is a band-centric destination. Only maybe recently has a city like Kuala Lumpur or maybe Bangkok or Singapore city, risen to be like an international invitation place for bands. At the time that you went and did this stuff, it was certainly...
And again, what year is this?
This is 2000?
2003? I think it was 2003 and 2005. Or 2003, 2006.
So pretty early, and as, not to say other bands weren't doing it, but it wasn't like it was punk bands doing it, or top tier Rolling Stones kind of acts, Or am I right?
Yeah, there was no. Okay.
There was no infrastructure for that. There was no
right. There was no
tour routing or anything like that.
People. I was checking my email in a squat in Croatia,
right?
And I get an email, and it's from Ahmed in Kuala Lumpur, who asked if he could release our record locally, and I was like, because they can't afford to import them there.
Well,
and I was like, yeah, you can release it, but we'll also come there and play.
Yeah.
What were you doing in Croatia?
On tour.
Yeah. So, just quickly stick to a question. If you're going to a place like that where, I guess in the grand objective view of it, it is kind of 50-50, a tourist destination for you and a tour as a band. And I think that it's easy to argue that, if not even more of a tourist destination in a place like that than it is a band routing. So, having the excuse to go visit other things, one of the few times that I've kind of ended a tour and stayed where I was in Southeast Asia. I stayed in Thailand and then went to Vietnam, and it was great, but very rarely do I end a tour and stay. For multiple reasons. So anyway, when you tour in other places, or when you toured in let's say Europe, were you still touring places that were as like Croatia back then was still not, was also not a very readily toured place.
And in that, we also did Macedonia and Serbia, which are way less.
Yeah. I mean, I've only done Croatia in the last year, you know. So, point being, when you played other more developed, less third world, for lack of a better term, places, did the balance of birding and banding...
there was very little birding, and it would all be incidental. You know, we hit a park nearby, or just see things fly over, or out the window of the van. Because that's the thing, is like when you are in, you can make money in Europe.
Yeah.
So you play every day. Because if you don't play a day, then you don't get money for that
day. You still have
day.
to water your horses.
Right, and you're paying for the van and the back line every day that you don't play. Yeah.
If you're not playing, you're paying.
All the equipment. They call it back line. Yeah, all the equipment. So, and we took the money. We make money in Europe. You know, we made a fair amount of money in Europe, and we used that to buy our tickets. We played Europe twice, but the second time we toured Europe, we used the money we made in Europe to pay to fund our second tour in Asia. The first tour in Asia we actually paid out of pocket, but and then.
So, but even with the incidental stuff, do you remember anything interesting that you saw from the window of the van, or incidentally flying over?
Oh yeah,
in a park that you happened to hit when you were like a few hours before your show or something.
Yeah, I remember seeing like long-tailed tits, which are like is really it's like cannibals of the chickadees. I remember seeing them like I don't know what they're picking at rock salt or something, and like on the ground like by this house we're staying at, and I think some birds like
where.
This was somewhere in the Balkans. I forget exactly where. Which is cool because years later, my friend, there's the first Bathory LP has there was a misprint on the album cover, and the goat was yellow, and I bought this from Jim Winters. Me and Liam was really good friend with Jim Winters, who was briefly in Earth Crisis and in other bands. Yeah. But he
love you, Jim.
Yeah. So we got this, I found out that this record is unbelievably rare. It's because, pioneering like Viking, Swedish, proto black metal band. And my friend who's Christopher from DS13 and Imperial Leather and all these bands in Sweden, he was wearing a Bathory shirt. And I was like, "Yo, man, you got the yellow goat?" And he goes, "No, that's the Holy Grail. I'll probably never have it." And I was like, "I got it upstairs." And he's like, "Yeah, right." And I'm like, "Yeah, come upstairs." So he's at my house because I was doing a show for his band. I show it to him, and he's like, he couldn't believe it that And I was like, "Take it." And he's like, "You're shitting me." I was like, "Take it." I was like, "It means way more to you than it does to me. You're a great friend. Take it."
Yeah.
And years later, he writes me. He's like, "I still owe you something for that record. What do you want?" And by this point, I stopped collecting records. And I said, "Send me some Swedish bird watching stuff." And then get a package in the mail a few weeks later, and one of them is a long-tailed tit shirt. So, and see that long-tailed tit on tour with Kill the Man Who Questions, that was one of the things that got me back into birding.
On tour with the name of the band?
Kill the Man Who Questions.
Got it.
I was at the roadie for them. And that was that was full circle for me. Because and it was like, so that, and I remember, seeing like hooded crows and carrying crows and
where?
Well, they're all throughout Europe, and they're like our crows. They're in the cities, I mean, I remember seeing hooded crows in Stockholm and seeing northern lapwings in Serbia on the side of the road. And
if you had to pick one city in both Europe and Southeast Asia, like the one place where it was like unexpectedly, urban.
But still wildlife?
Yeah, just a place where, like I was saying like earlier, I remember in like Old Town Tel Aviv seeing a pair of white, probably barn owls, just being like, it's just really bizarre, and it just kind of seemed almost symbolic. It was such a cool sighting.
Well, for me, it would be Singapore.
So, yeah, I mean...
in Asia, it would be Singapore because it has these incredible reserves. Right. I mean, I like Singapore. It's cool. I like other cities. Like I like Bangkok. I like Kuala Lumpur a little bit better because I like Hong Kong a whole lot better.
Have you ever seen the bats in Sydney?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
I got an interview with a woman from the Australasian Bat Society talking about urban fruit bats.
That was seeing that was pretty...
I have some in Brisbane, I also made out with a beautiful Australian girl while fruit bats were flying over her head. So that was kind of awesome.
Yeah.
But I definitely was like, hey, do you want to take a walk and look for tawny frogmouths with me? We didn't see them, but we saw the bats and made out. But it was cool. It was awesome. But the problem was I was kind of on drugs and couldn't really get into it. Well, at the time I was just straight edge, didn't do any drugs, and I had a toothache. And I was on tour, and someone here's a painkiller, and it was a real painkiller. It was some aspirin, and I was like, oh man, I'm on Percocet. This girl's really pretty, and there's a bunch of fruit bats flying around. This is awesome, but
bad country shit.
Yeah. So, when it comes to Europe, for me, two things come to mind. I was really amazed by Rome because of two things: kestrels, European kestrels nest on the Colosseum. I mean, how amazing is that?
Sure.
And right outside of Rome is a wetland, one of those sewage mitigation things, man-made wetland. And I know about this because after we played our show in Rome, this guy comes up and interviews us, and he's like, what for his fanzine? And he asks everybody, he's like, what does everybody do in the band besides play band? Yeah. And I went through everybody in the band, and I ended with me, and I was like, I'm really into birds. I just got back from doing field research in the Arctic with snow geese, and I'm a real big bird watcher, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, that's very interesting to me, because I am an ornithologist. And he was a ranger and studied raptor migration. He took me up birding the next day. Amazing. So Rome really, but the one thing to me, if you talk about, we should talk urban wildlife, is the storks that nest on a church or a house. These, in the towns, and
in Europe, you're saying?
Yeah. So
I mean, I remember seeing stuff like that in, I want to say maybe it was, Belgium or Holland or Germany. But yeah, just seeing just kind of into these smaller towns and these, chimneys with these giant,
yeah,
just giant nests on top.
Yeah, because our only stork is the wood stork, and you got to go to South Carolina or Florida, and they're well, I've seen urban nesting wood storks, but they're in sewage treatment plant, cypress trees.
It's not quite the same thing. It's as if our chimney swifts were how tall? 3-4 feet tall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of crazy. So that's the kind of two. But I really want to go back to. I really want to go back to Europe. I don't want to sound jaded, but I'm not going to say I'm overseeing tropical birds. But the thing is, once you get into tropical birding, and then obviously that's where the diversity is. You go there all the time, but I'm really kind of fascinated. I want to go to another temperate part of the world and see the other temperate birds because I haven't really paid attention to temperate birds in a long time.
Did you ever make it to Japan?
Yeah, we toured Japan twice. Remember, that's why I saw the black kite over Hiroshima.
Yeah.
And then we went to Hokkaido. So our guy who did our tour, he plays in Muga. He'd never been to Hokkaido, the North Island, in it's kind of like the Alaska of Japan or whatever. I mean, it's still pretty urbanized. There's been rural, but just some big parks and I said I want to go there, and he's like, "Well, I'll go with you. I've never been there." And it's the kind of part of the world where you don't have to be a birder because it's just beautiful cliffs and sea ice and all this stuff, and then stellar sea eagles, which are a third bigger than bald eagles, and red-crowned crane, which is the emblem of Japan, and all these other charismatic mega birds, and so
there's some very interesting rat snakes too. But go on.
Nice, and yeah, and we we were there in the winter, and it was funny because he's from more south, he's from Honshu, and he was in Nagoya, so he didn't, they're still kind of I don't know what they're called. They look like palmettos, kind of the a little bit more cold tolerant palms. You probably somewhere like North Carolina. And so I actually had to bring him. I went to the thrift store and got him warm clothes, because he didn't have any, and it was really cool. So I forget how I talked about that.
We're talking about temperate birds.
Oh yeah, so
Europe
going back to Europe.
But the thing is, remember birding? I kind of got my, going on tour at 24 got me back into birding, and then I didn't, I had to get back into it and advance even beyond where I was when I was a little kid. So I want to go back to these places with more time and with the skill level that I've achieved now, where I can really hit it hard and and also the internet is a thing now, and like, you know, I mean, it was just starting then, you know, and so I'm just really, so now like you can go and really know where things are, and like I have a lot more information. So, and I want to see my friends. I want to see my friends in, you know, I do want to go back to, I have a friend in Korea. I want to go. He's a birder in Korea, but I want to go and see all my friends in Europe. And it's funny, like Ben from Hardskin. Johnny Takeaway from Hardskin. His nom de guerre. Was like, yo, come. He's like, come to my house, you know, and look at the birds in the garden outside of London. You know, like it's cool. Like as punks get older, they chill out and get into more hobbies. And I've been able to do that where, you know, when I'm on, you know, my friend Paul is the drummer of Tragedy, and you know, his Hair's Gone. Those are the bands that, you know, I did shows for them for all these years, and now Paul's like, come to Portland and let's go salmon fishing, and we totally did. We were like fishing for salmon in like the, you know, the Columbia River and the, you know, river. So it's awesome that like I was kind of like into other stuff besides the birding while I was touring and meeting all these people, but now they've gotten older and chilled out and like got other hobbies, and a lot of those hobbies are outdoorsy hobbies. So now I can go visit my friends. They mean a lot to me, and do either, you know, explore nature, you know, either birding or fishing or hiking, you know, in these other cities. And I want to do that to Europe. You know, I want to go back and hang out in Europe and see, you know, all the wildlife in European cities. And now we do the podcast, I want to go back to Europe and really, you know, explore those cities, you know, while I'm visiting my friends.
I have the urge. So, as a nature lover, do you think of yourself as a birder? Liam, do you think of yourself as a birder or anything in particular?
No, not necessarily. Just sort of just a lover of the outdoors and just nature lover.
Well, you do have mid-range binoculars.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely, I look forward to the opportunities to go out and spend time with Tony and, you know, other people that I get the opportunity to bird with occasionally. You know, it's certainly more of like a pastoral, you know, campfire-ish type experience for me, where it's very social and socially driven. But I am I don't know, an intellectual, so to speak, and I like sort of collecting information, and yeah, I don't know, and so I know, but officially I am not necessarily a birder. It's something that I would like to get more into, but yeah.
I was going to say I myself am warming to birding, getting there, but I'm the herper in the group. And so what I and even before part of what led us to do the podcast and that we have these interests in the first place is that I've always, since I moved to Philadelphia, I've loved like herping vacant lots and like abandoned industrial spaces and that kind of thing. Okay. And so now I want to go, I think of places I've traveled, not in touring, but living abroad in Central and South America. And now I'm like, thinking of all the vacant lots, all the old factories, all the places I could have been looking under boards, and didn't, and now I want to go back and do that again. So I dig how that feels. I want to ask you guys, both of you, I mean, in touring, and this is sort of shifting a little bit to this, to one of our favorite terms, the synanthropic organisms. You know, we talked a little bit about sort of the native wildlife and fauna. Do you have any memories of things like rats, you know, or what we think of as pest species, but we, you know, more generously call synanthropic organisms?
You know,
or pigeons or whatever.
Well, yeah, one comes to mind, and you'll like this because two species come to mind is geckos, and I feel like, you know, I'm from Philly, so I feel like rats don't like stick out in my mind. You know, I see all the you know, like I just expect to see rats in cities. I can't really even come up with a memory, you know. But in
of not seeing rats.
Yeah. But in there's house geckos all over. You know, like you're you know, wherever you are, there's geckos in Asia, like behind your headboard of your you know, your guest house or your friend's house you're staying at. But one of my memories, I might have even talked about this, was did I talk about the gecko in Bangkok, the Tokay gecko? Yeah,
we did. Yeah. So no harm mentioning it again.
Yeah, well, saying how, my friend took me, I really want to see one of these tokay geckos, and we went to like this,
And we'll stop to describe a tokay gecko, which is a large arboreal gecko, but with a massive head. And when I remember I wanted to take care of one for a guy I knew in school when I was a kid, and it bit me once, and it felt like when the door, like when you, like not the front side of the door, but sort of the hinge side of the door, if you ever get your finger caught in that's what it felt like.
Yeah, they're notoriously mean.
Ornery.
Yeah, so, this guy, behind this guy's house was a corrugated fiberglass piece that was just propped up, and he pulled it, and there's like the eggs cemented to the wall, and then there's a couple young ones, and a Siamese cat, which is funny because we're in Thailand, and a Siamese cat just comes out and houses one right in front of us, and I was like, this is crazy, It was also in that yard, there was also a nesting Oriental magpie robin, and
What the hell's an Oriental magpie?
This beautiful black and white little flycatcher.
Okay.
So I remember seeing that. I remember seeing white-breasted. I think it is the white-breasted kingfisher. It has a couple different names, I think, but and they call it white-breasted kingfisher, which is crazy because it's brown and like aquamarine on the back. I don't know why they call it. They mention it's white breast, but I saw that on top of a radio antenna in Kuala Lumpur. Also seeing macaques in cities in Asia. And that was really, that was amazing to me. Plus like going to like, going to like, Sungai Buloh, this amazing wetland reserve in Singapore, and seeing a estuarine crocodile, saltwater crocodile, seeing that. It's just, amazing, wildlife that I got to see in these cities, both like incidentally and also like seeking them out, like going in, on tour in, Surabaya, Indonesia. There was a whole group of punks that they found that I was a bird watcher, and so they arranged to take me bird watching. I remember I'm like 260, I'm a big man, and these kids put me in the back of their like scooters. In fact, one time we went somewhere where we went up a hill, and they literally had to get off and had to walk up the hill, like basically a mountain, because I was too heavy for to be two of us on the scooter. But there wasn't. So these guys took me to rice paddies, like on the edge of this, industrial city with like really bad air pollution, and we saw like this endemic little kingfisher and like white-winged black terns and collared the little Javan plovers, and all this. It was amazing, and it was. It's just this crazy industrial city, in. So yeah, that's one of my favorite memories, and I really wish I could get in touch with these kids. I don't know if the punks that took me birding in Surabaya, if anybody can get a hold of them, let me know.
That is a priority, man. We got to get a hold of these guys.
Yeah, so those kids were awesome. I'm trying to think other. Taipei in Taiwan.
Leave it open. Mike's coming in.
Has a massive. It's probably like the Wissahickon Park or. Forest Park in Portland or whatever, one of the big, parks in the city.
You just triggered a guy and then to contact about Taipei. Go ahead. Cool.
But this park is like, right, there's a wetland park near the, with like boardwalk and mangroves that I went to, and I saw some great wildlife there. And then I went into this forest park in like the hills, probably still in Taipei, and saw like, Taiwan magpie and Taiwan, barbet and all these other amazing birds, it was awesome. And so that was a great city for urban wildlife that we need to talk to people about, if we can find anybody to talk, there. And oh man, one thing at Taipei in the Botanic Gardens, there's nesting Malayan night herons, which are a super rare bird that they're like a cryptic, they're like a forest living night heron, that is really hard to see, and for some reason there's a breeding population of them in Taipei, in the Botanic Garden, and they're really easy to see.
There's a German guy who would post a lot on Field Herp Forum, who I'm thinking of, this guy Hans, who moved to Malaysia. He moved to Borneo, but I think he's a German guy. I think he's like an English translator or something like that. or maybe multi-language translator who had lived in Taipei, was posting all the time from Taipei, and then moved to Borneo. So I'm thinking he's the kind of guy I want to get to record something and send us notes, or to connect us to people in Taipei. So
we played the Indonesian side of Borneo, and in what they call it, Kalimantan, and
Liam, Gigi.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
in the right outside the city, like basically still in like the city district, is a nature center. That's like the gateway to this preserved area, and they have like sun bears in an enclosure that have been taken from captivity, but they can't be released into the wild. Basically, say wherever there's enough habitat to have a sun bear, there's already a sun bear there. So you put them there, they'll be kicked out by the other sun bears. There's also a couple orangutans still in this forest and everything, and so we played that. We had an amazing show in it's Balikpapan is a city. We played had an amazing show there, and stayed in this a few nights in the nature reserve. I got bit by a spider 2 inches from my nuts, which really freaked me out.
Which direction, Tony?
There's on my thigh, and I did the thing where I draw a
circle to
see if it was fine though. But I was like, of all places, I mean, I got bit by a spider in Borneo right by my nuts, and I was like, this is crazy. Such a crazy feeling waking up to being bitten by a spider.
That's nuts.
That was awesome. Those kids are great. In fact, they
shout out to that spider.
Yeah. The bulls are basically, but
there's the banana spiders and there's the nuts.
Tim Bull was the. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about nut spiders. Tim Bull was one of the guys that works at the reserve. He married one of the. I forgot her name, but his wife is an American who was working at the reserve too, and they moved to the States. And I want to hang out with them down here, but man, we had such a great time playing, amazing show in Balikpapan. I mean, it's awesome. You're like in Borneo playing a show. The kids know your records. They're like going crazy. You just saw the day before or earlier that day I saw Black Hornbill. I mean, this is just awesome. It was a famous incident there too, where like, my sandals got stolen a couple days before, because someone, I guess one of them was a souvenir because they're mine. And I only had one pair of shoes. So when I'm walking through the forest, I didn't really want to get them too muddy. And I was like really frustrated. Like, this is like a frustrating experience because we get to the forest too late to really see any birds or walking too fast. It's hard. A lot of these countries, you don't really have, go there on your own. It's not like here you just, you go to a park in the U.S. and they let you in and give you a trail map. You have to arrange for a guide to get there. But having this all worked out, it's too late to see anything. And they're walking you around too fast. I don't want to sound ungrateful, but it's just this. It seems like a lot of these developing countries, there's an unbelievable amount of bureaucracy to get anything done. That's and so I was really frustrated. And I was walking along this river, and and the trail's really narrow. I have to basically, I'm a big wide man. I have to kind of walk single file. I mean, I have to put 1 foot in front of the other to not fall into this canal. And my foot gets stuck in the mud. And I lifted up my
pair of shoes,
and my shoe's still stuck in there. And I pick it up, and I just toss it up the trail. And then when I go to pick it back up, I lean over, and I didn't realize the bank. You kind of expect to be able to step in the water a little bit, because no, it was a cut bank that was it was over my head. So I went into this river with crocodiles in it over my head. And how to get pulled out, the thing is, the guy kept, I'm a huge man, and this guy who's 130 pounds is trying to pull me out, and I'm like, you can't pull me, let go of my hand so I could get myself out of here. So he's trying to pull me, and I'm like, let go, and then I'm binoculars first. So I hand him my binoculars, and
what kind of binoculars did you have then?
These at the time, these were Bruntons. They're sort of $1,400 binoculars. They're really good ones, it was hilarious. It was a good time. There's a couple of anecdotes there.
Very good anecdotes.
I like anecdotes and accolades. It's kind of how I roll. Oh yeah, but when I fell in the water, right? It was cathartic. I all the stress of me. went away, and I was already muddy and wet, and there was a leech on me when I came out. Anyway,
Stand by me.
Yeah, but the thing is, in that part of the world, you have terrestrial leeches that are in the leaf litter anyway. So I already had a bunch of leeches on me, but these were, But I was like such a release. I could just enjoy the walk. I was like so much more, and it was a nice feeling. Kind of like whatever. I'm muddy, and I'm having a good time. And it was lovely. And we raised money. My World Series of Birding team raised money for that. We called ourselves Team Bristol Head because they're born in Bristol Head, and then McBird, and we raised money for that
of course.
Nature Center for the World Series of Birding. And yeah, it was awesome. Oh, we're good. That's I think the episode we got to do is World Series of Birding.
Are there urban specific teams?
No, but I mean, so much of what we do.
Can it be like a fight companion type podcast?
Yes. Well, we're huge Joe Rogan fans, by the way.
Yes.
Yes, we need to talk to Joe Rogan. He has some really kind of messed up views on hunting predators, and I love him to death. I think he needs to, I always have a man crush on Joe Rogan.
A little bit.
Yeah, we're actually drinking liquor because it was mentioned on the Joe Rogan podcast right now.
Not that you started drinking scotch recently.
No, but this particular brand was mentioned on the podcast. But yeah, we'd like to. I'm not trying to get myself on his podcast because I'm not the expert that he needs. I just think that he needs to have. He kind of he just keeps. I'm a hunter, whatever. Don't get me wrong, but he keeps having all these hunting TV show guys on there and talking about predators and whatnot, and he has these ideas predators are really dangerous to people. We shouldn't have them around their cities, and or we need to control wolves in mountain lions. And I just think that he's got some kind of. He kind of has some views. I think he kind of likes. How do I articulate this?
Convenient views.
Yeah, or he reaffirms what he already thinks to go along with his preconceived notions. To support his hobby, and I just think that because he's he's a fan of science and discourse. I think he should have some wildlife biologists on, some real experts, and challenge his views on it. A little bit.
Do you have any wildlife anecdotes anymore that you've thought of that?
Wildlife anecdotes
from others? Philadelphia or other cities?
Let's see.
Where do you live in Philadelphia?
I live in Fishtown.
What do you see around your place in Fishtown?
I see pigeons. I see raccoons. I see.
Let's put it this way: Philly is an unbelievably urban. Dense city. It's as dense as urban.
Fishtown's pretty damn dense.
Yeah, it's for Philly, for residential neighborhood. Fishtown is as urban as dense as Philly gets, and Philly is more urban and more dense than any other city other than New York City.
In the United States.
And I'd say it's on par with New York City, we're just smaller.
Yeah, so Fishtown's row houses, blocks and block row houses.
And row houses don't even have, there's row houses without the little tiny patch of dirt in the front.
Yeah.
Or in the
little garden in the back.
A little garden in the back. Lots of squirrels, lots of possums, lots of, small birds like little, starlings and house sparrow type things. Occasional, not being an avid bird watcher, I hear the occasional shriek of something that sounds like a sort of interesting bird. And then I'll see carcasses of things in the park nearby. Stray cats and dogs, obviously. Our neighbor has a pig. I don't know. I don't see
you have nighthawks nesting on roofs there. There's some...
Do the raccoons ever mess with your stuff?
I get the possums a little bit, squirrels for sure. Feral cats are probably the worst of them in terms of messing with my trash and stuff. Mice... typical city stuff.
Feral cats crapping in your garden and your flower pots and stuff, probably.
Yeah, some of that. But it's pretty. I would think it's pretty mild. Not unlike stargazing, it's pretty neutered in the city. Not that it's what I mean.
Yeah, but it is, but it's still. I just find it. This is part of what I like about what we talk about in the podcast is that. even in a place where you say, like, yeah, it is, you're right.
Well, let me put it this. I see the world as I am,
Yeah.
and I'm not open. You know, I don't look as... I'm sure I look more frequently than a lot of people do.
I'm sure you do. Yeah.
But, and you know, and look, you know, because I know places to look. If I hear a noise, I will look. If I'm walking, I look up and look for perched things.
I will say this about Fishtown. If I was to choose a neighborhood, when I think of places to live in Philly and observe wildlife, Fishtown might be the last on my list.
The river's not that far.
It's good people watching.
You got the Delaware right there. But I'm saying, even in the last place you'd look in Philly, we've got you just rattled off multiple native species that live around you without anyone actively supporting them. And they're certainly passively supporting them. I mean, they're
I heard goldfinches and
the trees that we plant.
Blue jays and
I think
cardinals there. You know,
sure. I've seen the occasional things like that.
And so, I mean, I think it's still a special thing that you've got that you sort of that in a so thoroughly urban anthropogenic like landscape as Fishtown, you still got a lot of like non-human stuff living around you. It's like, and they're just part of the
landscape, part of the biosphere or whatever.
They're part of your community in a way. And it's and also you'll talk about the feral cats and the rats and the mice. And the pigeons and sort of the other feral stuff, but it's still like
it's part of the environment.
It's its own weird little ecosystem there.
Yeah.
All right. So for conclusion, we want to remind everybody to like us on iTunes, Stitcher, share the hell out of us to let other people know about how awesome this podcast is. Thank you very much. Send us an email at urbanwildlifecast@gmail.com. Again, urbanwildlifecast@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at urbwildlifecast. Find us on Facebook. Let us know what you think of the podcast. Rate us and like us again on all your platforms.
So that kind of reminds me of something where I feel like I don't do that enough in I'm a podcast fanatic. So how can I ask people to do that when... I mean, I definitely do it sometime for podcasts, but I'm a podcast fanatic and I don't do it enough for the podcasts I like. So I want to...
I'll like a few podcasts this week.
Being that we have this platform...
Be generous about it and sort of model the behavior we want to see.
Should we give a couple shout-outs to podcasts we really like?
Ooh. We still love In Defense of Plants.
Yeah, I love In Defense of Plants. Perhaps my favorite podcast is Monster Talk. I believe it's in the Skeptic Society, and it's so they talk about it's cryptozoology, but from a skeptical point of view.
I would hope so.
Right. So, I mean, it's not like some weird conspiracy theory stuff.
Although you do a fun fantasy fiction kind of thing with like very sincere. I don't know.
I do really like the Eyes on Conservation podcast. That's a good one. And I really like Astronomy Cast. That's one I listen to a lot. And of course, Bird Calls Radio and This Birding Life when they ever actually put episodes out, which is very rare. And of course, the greats like Stuff You Should Know and 99% Invisible. But I'll be honest, I do listen to a lot of Game of Thrones and Walking Dead podcasts from Bold Move. Those guys are awesome. I also
like the Nerdette and the Nerdette Game of Thrones recap.
I need to listen to that. I am a big fan of the UFC, believe it or not.
You don't say.
And I love the MMA Hour with Ariel Hawani. I'm a huge fan of Luke Thomas's podcasts. I am a big fan of the MMA Beat, which also includes, Luke Thomas and Ariel Hawani. I'm a big fan of Sure Dog Radio. Anything TJ DeSantis produces, I listen to. He's great. And
we might clip those down a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, here's shout outs to some of our podcasts that we listen to a lot.
I've been getting into some of the Vox connected podcasts. The Weeds, which is a policy, not at all nature, but public policy heavy podcast. My only educational background is in social sciences and public policy, so there you go. And Ezra Klein podcast. You guys know who Ezra Klein is?
No.
Wonk blog over at Washington Post, then started Vox. He mentioned my old project, the PB&J campaign, in an interview, which I'm wearing the shirt right now. So I was pretty psyched about that. In any case, I listen to that a lot. I like Living on Earth. I mean, it's a public radio show, but I listen to that as a podcast. It has me inspired. Someday, when I have time for another podcast, my next podcast should be the Radical Environmentalist Hour.
Yeah.
Like, I think environmental stuff is nice, but like, I feel like the environmentalists that I hear in mainstream media are all trying to be too nice. And like, I want to edgier environmental, like, presentation.
Yeah.
Like, what's the why am I blanking on the dude's name? The one who wrote Monkey Wrenching.
Edward Abbey.
Edward Abbey's introduction to no, he wrote Monkey Wrenching, but Monkey Wrenching, right? He wrote the intro to Foreman's Monkey Wrenching book.
Yeah.
And it is like a short manifesto of environmentalism that I think is like a harder core environmentalism than we're used to, where it's sort of like saying, like, environmentalists like are these days generally pretty nice and play within the lines and stuff. I mean, some of them get more protesty around the Keystone Pipeline and that kind of thing. I'll give them that. But or trying to stop up that port in Portland, I think, when they were trying to keep the shipping, the drilling platforms from coming out. But his little piece right there is basically saying, like, if someone is destroying your house, you don't have to stick to totally passive means to stop them from destroying your house. And when people destroy the environment, we should not feel so bound to being polite and lawful. Like, there's certainly a role for civil disobedience and a role for much more confrontational stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm not saying that. I think you need a full range of approaches in an advocacy effort, and I think that needs to be weighted higher in the environmental advocacy effort.
I agree, and for me, the world is being destroyed, and in a way, all these actions are self-defense, if you think about it. But me, the way I look at it is my the way I justify myself not taking these more direct actions is I'm in a position to do a lot of good with my job. And
I'm not blaming us for not doing
I know,
stuff
but like,
at this
man,
moment.
like, I do think about it. I'm like, if the world goes the way I think it is, are we complicit in not trying harder? But we also used our platform to give a shout out.
Right on.
For so many people that I know that have an overlap with wildlife and mixed martial arts.